And she says, Chanie, you do realize that you look at me, I'm your answer. She says, I never met the Rebbe. She says, and I have such a deep love and commitment. I only know the Rebbe because of you. She was actually 10 years, I think about 10 years older than I am.
Beautiful.
She tells me this story. She says, and it was Erev Pesach, obviously, because of the story you'll see. She says that just yesterday, I went to the lobby of the Chabad house. I took your Pesach Seder flyer, and I went to the copy center on 2nd Avenue to make copies so I can give it out to everybody I know. Wow. As I'm walking out of the copy center, a mitzvah tank passes by with a huge picture of the Rebbe smiling and waving at me. She says, the Rebbe found a way to tell me, Yashikayach, thank you, Ariella. She says, you have nothing to worry about with your children. And I was thinking, interesting how she taught me this lesson, because I was so trapped by the only thing I know. I don't know anything else. And we want to not know anything else. And Mitzvah Shem, soon our children and grandchildren will dance together with the Rebbe.
Chanie, I'm going to jump in because I just got a message from a Shlucha who was in Ukraine and had to run away. I don't want to say where she was from, but she sent me this message. I sent her a song. Did you hear that song? I think Benny Friedman sings it about
that a year never breaks and a year never bends.
Yeah,
oh, I love it.
So I sent it to her, and she said somebody lent her children toys and books and a keyboard, and her 6-year-old taught herself this song. But she says at bedtime, she told me, this little 6-year-old, if only I would have brought my Hanukkah gelt with us, as they ran with one suitcase. So the mother asked her, what would you buy with your Hanukkah gelt? And she said, I would give it to Tati to save more Yidden from our town.
Wow.
So here also is a child that was raised far, far from the Rebbe, but so very close. So I just wanted to connect it to your story and to your Ariella, that you know what, people who didn't see, but they get it.
So I want to add something to that. I just heard this amazing story from my sister-in-law, Yehuda Lieberman Krasnianski in Australia. She lost her father, Rabbi Lieberman, in Belgium, a few months, like a month and a half, 2 months ago. And she told me an amazing story. Rabbi Lieberman was a tremendous Talmid Chacham and an unbelievable chassid. He came to Frierdiker Rebbe as a chassid, and he lost his sight for the last 10 years of his life. He didn't have sight. And nevertheless, he continued to learn, but he learned now with the Chavrusa. And they found out things about him that they never knew, because all these years he learned himself. But when he was learning with Chavrusa, it turns out that he knew the sources without his sight better than the person who had the sefer in front of him. So his son, and he would continue teaching his congregation and giving his drashas. So his son asked him, how is it that you talk to the congregation, Torah, as if you could see? And you know what he answered? He says, you know what I see in my not being able to see? I see a tzir of the Frierdiker Rebbe. So sometimes when you don't see, you actually have vision. You can see. It's not the physical experience. Sometimes it's something the neshama is seeing. And it reminded me, when I grew up, my mother always told me the story that when they were in Gruzia, they lived in Gruzia because Stalin's hand it was bad, but it wasn't as bad as if you lived closer to Moscow. And they never saw the Frierdiker Rebbe. Of course, they were chassidim, but the kids never saw. You couldn't just travel. It wasn't like you never left your village. Every night before they went to bed, my Baba Lipsker would tell the Kinderlach, wir wollen sich sehen mit dem Rebbe. And my mother said, she said it with such certitude, such that there wasn't even a question about it. But my mother said it was such an impossibility. Nobody even traveled from one village to another. How could you're going to see the Frierdiker Rebbe? But Baruch Hashem, they came out of Russia intact, which was a very unusual thing. And they came out on Yechidus to the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the whole family said Shehachianu on seeing the Frierdiker Rebbe. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said to them, it's I who should say Shehachianu, to see an intact Chassidish family come out of Russia and Europe.
Beautiful.
So Chaya, I thought, I think a lot of us heard this, but I don't know, I almost wanted to repeat it. The Farbengen, the Sikha that's been going around, that the Rebbe spoke on the Rebbe Rashab's 120th birthday.
Mm-hmm. Go for it.
So I just thought, even though we all, been seeing or hearing it being repeated the last week, there's points that the Rebbe was making. It was as if he's talking to us right now, not even a question. Like it's you really just, it's chilling. So I'm just gonna, and jump in at any point, Chaya, if you know. So the Rebbe says a Jew was born 120 years ago in a small city across the sea. He says, and we all know he was a Nasi, we know how great he was, we know all that. But what you don't know is, what does it have to do with me in Brooklyn? The Rebbe says, what does it have to do with you in Brooklyn? What connection does it have, a Yid that lived 120 years ago? The Rebbe says, but the Torah teaches that, and he quotes the Baal Shem Tov that says, when it says, Hamachadish b'tuva b'chol yom tamid, it means not just like new, he says it is new. So that means, he said, tear yourself, the Rebbe says, away from your present state of mind. And think about this. Focus as if you're literally seeing him, even if you never did in your life. And again, I'm just overlapping this with the Rebbe. Everything the Rebbe told us about the Rebbe Rashab, about the Rebbe. And then think about, and then the Rebbe quotes the Rebbe Rashab's words that we're very familiar with, that he says, I'm going to heaven, but I'm leaving my writings to you. And the Rebbe said he invested his soul in it. It's something I'm asking you to take it. He left it for us. Now it's up to us to take it, choose it. And then the Rebbe says, forget about the clock, forget about yourself. Remember, it's 120 years since he is in this world, and since he was born. Feel it this for a moment, he says, or for an hour, but at least feel it. By the way, this is a loose translation, so it might not be precise to the words of the Rebbe. I tried to be, but it's not like I took it from somewhere authoritative. I just was writing notes as I was listening to the Sikha. And he says, and look at it, it's a new thing entirely. And whether you do it from time to time or day to day, decide for yourself what you're going to accomplish. And guess what? I mean, I'm saying guess what? The Rebbe says it will come down into your behaviors, make a transformation in who you are and the transformation you can make in this world. And the Rebbe said, it's like the Rambam says that you could tip the world in 1 second with one action. The world is dark, but you can tip it. And the Rebbe goes on and Jem did an amazing job of actually doing footage of the war now going on in Ukraine while they have the Rebbe's voice saying this, that yes, it's true. It's a very, very dark time. And we all see the signs. And the Gemara says that when you see something clearly, you don't need proof for it. Nations are fighting one with another, even worse than what Torah tells us is going to happen, the Rebbe says. He says, but look at the capital of 120, it's capital Kufchav Aleph, the capital for when you turn 120. The Rebbe says, Esa Einai El Hashem. Raise your eyes, Esa Einai El Haharim, raise your eyes to the mountains. Me'ayin Yavayazri. The darkness can bring you down, the Rebbe says. It could make you very, very heavy. He says, but that's only if you're not aware what this capital means. And the Rebbe goes on to say that it says, Me'ayin Yavayazri. Most people read it as a question. Me'ayin Yavayazri, from where will my help come, my salvation come? But the Rebbe says, read it as a statement. Me'ayin Yavayazri. My salvation will come from ayin. That's like the unknowable. That's like the, beyond what we could even wrap our brains around. Hine lo yanum lo yashan shema Yisrael. And the Rebbe says, Rashi brings down that Rashi says hine always means with joy when it uses the word hine. And the Chassidus explains that that the Eibishter won't sleep because that's referring, sleep is like a level of symptoms. So it's above that level. But the Eibishter, we're dealing with ayin, that level that's like beyond. And he says, we're talking about now during Gullus. We're not talking about during good times. During Gullus, darkness, war, that Simcha Payetz Gader, Hamaisa Hua Ikar. He says, joy Kipshutai, Mifta, obviously strong. The Rebbe goes through all the Miftzam that we should reconnect ourselves. And he says, and we will leave this Galus just like the Yidden left Egypt. And that the Rebbe says, but I didn't have a chance to look up, maybe Chaya, the Rebbe says, these last days before they left, their homes were already filled with light. So may be for us. Do you know what the Rebbe is referring to when he says that?
No.
Anyway, I just thought, even though we don't have a long time for the Farbengen, but I just thought that it was well worth hearing these words of the Rebbe discussing the 120 years. Because again, our children hopefully are being raised, yes, feel the relevance of everything the Rebbe teaches us. And that if you learn something from the Rebbe, or if you you learn the letters, you learn a sicha, a maimer, you put yourself, the Rebbe is saying, put yourself, close your eyes, even if you could only do it for one moment. Picture the Rebbe before you. And that's where we'll gain our strength. Stop thinking so much about yourself and thinking more about what the Rebbe and what the Rebbe wants from us.
Beautiful, really beautiful. Well, if we tune in, it is palpable that Yudis, you started by saying this is historic, and I wrote that in my notes that you and I are a part of history. Now, every human being is a part of history because the clock doesn't stop and it keeps going. But this is thousands of years in the making. And for whatever divine cosmic reason, you and we are collectively here. And we're going to see it before our very eyes. So we can focus on that darkness. And we are still in the last throes of, I think it's, I like to think of it as the last dance of the Satan. This is he's holding on for dear life. And you know what? He's going to be out of a job very soon. So if we can just hang in there and instead of looking back, look forward and remember that it's ut, and it's us. It's us. Whatever stage we're in now, that is exactly where we're supposed to be. There's no mistakes. I kind of shared this with you before. What is one word that the Eibishter never says? I know it sounds like a joke. You have any ideas? What's one word that God never says? Okay. Oops.
Oh.
He never says oops, which means that the world events right now, part of the process of Golis. Someone is single, part of the process. Someone is waiting for children, part of the process. But if we could just hold on, what's that song? Just a little bit longer, it is going to be awesome. And it's you and me. So we can't have despair because it is historic. In a minute, keheret ayin, like the blink of an eye, it's going to be kuloi taif. It's going to be all good, which is fascinating. How it's going to be, I don't know. When, who, what? Zelog Patli makes no difference to me. Just do it already, Eibishter. I'll share a quick, what was the one word that Hashem never says? Oops. Someone wrote in the chat. I love it. That is Hashgacha Pratis. That's our life. There's no mistakes. So the week of Gimel Tammuz, I've shared this before, the week of Gimel Tammuz, a shlucha from Ukraine actually called me. I don't know why she called me. Maybe I was next, used to be something called the Tzach list, a Chabad directory. And she, remember when it was long distance? Remember when we used to have something called long distance and cost a lot of money and to just think the clock is ticking. Anyway, she said, say something. And I had nothing to say and we were both just crying. But she shared, I'll make it short, that one of her ladies in her Chabad house said, you know what a relay race is? You have a runner, runs around the track, he passes the baton to the next person, that person runs around the track. And she said that they've passed the baton 6 times and they saved the fastest runner for the last round. and he takes the baton and he's racing around the track. And just before he gets to the finish line, he stops. And the crowd is standing on their feet. And he turns to the crowd and he says, I want you to cross the finish line. And they say, but you're at the finish line. Just cross and then we'll talk about it. And he says, no, I want you to have the privilege. So this woman from Russia, from Ukraine says, what should we do? Drop the baton? Like chas v'shalom. We are at the finish line. We just need to cross it. And what a schus that is. No, we gotta hang in there. B'simcha, don't listen to the news and don't because we could get crazed from the gloom and doom. It is a part of the godly process, and it's gonna be good.
I think you touched on an amazing point. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the simcha part.
You know what?
Because the Rebbe always spoke about that throughout our years. No, simcha Paris, the Rebbe would sing, and Chaya and I stood near each other by many of Farbengen. And if you were there, that we grew up with, if I could just convey the excitement in the room, how we thought, mamish, that second Mashiach was coming.
You know what? I remember Erev Pesach then that I wanted to buy a sheep. My husband's like, calm down. But it was one of my ladies, I love her dearly. She was just becoming from. She comes the first day Yom Tov to shul, and she was very chilly. She says she slept with the window open. I said, why'd you do that? She said, because when the shofar blows, I want to be able to hear it. Like it was that real. So I said to her, sweetheart, it's called the Tekiah Gedola, the great shofar. Even where we live, we're going to hear it, you know? So you could sleep with the window closed, but it's so palpable. So people have a kindness. Okay, that was a long time ago. That's, you know, we've been waiting. We're on hold for, but this is it, my friend. This is the real deal. What's not to be happy about? What's not to be excited about? Mashiach is imminent. And
my son shared something interesting with me. One of my sons, he said, when the Rebbe spoke about how important the birthday celebration is, right after the Rebbetzin passed, and the Rebbe spoke, so there were three main times. He spoke on her birthday, Chafei Adar. He spoke on his birthday, Yud Aleph Nissan, and then on Achar and Sheb Pesach. And one of the points that the Rebbe makes is that Mashiach is like a Leda, it's like a birth. There's the connection between celebrating our birthdays now, celebrating the fact that our neshamas came to this world to do a mission, to finish the deal, came here for a reason. And the fact that Mashiach is considered the birth pangs. And that's why I always tell people when they ask that question that you just said, referenced, but it didn't happen. And it's like when you're in your 9th month and about to give birth, no one says it didn't happen on my due date, so I'm not giving birth.
Point. Beautiful point. That's right.
Like, if I didn't give birth on my due date, that means I'm really giving birth today. And every day that passes, it's more likely you're giving birth, not less likely. No one goes home and says, okay, I guess the doctors were wrong.
Great point.
That's not the way it was. So I have to tell you a beautiful story I once heard. The Frierdiker Rebbe, before he actually settled in the United States, he actually came to America first a few years earlier. And they gave him a list of places he traveled around. He wasn't yet sure where he was going to settle, and he was also collecting money. They gave him a list of people to go to and meet. So he visited Chicago, and one of the people, it was a long list that he should go meet. One of the people was all the way at the end of the list, and he asked, who's this guy? And they said, only if you have time, visit this one. He says, oh, no, let's start with him then. He doesn't really love from Jews. He's not such a...
I love it.
So the Rebbe says, the Frierdiker says, let's start with him. Who was he? He was a tailor, but a custom-made tailor. He would only make custom-made, and he had very high clientele, and he was very wealthy. So the Frierdiker Rebbe, out of politeness, everybody heard the Frierdiker Rebbe was like a giant. Everybody heard, so out of politeness, he accepted the appointment. But the first thing he told the Frierdiker Rebbe when he walked into his office was, Rebbe, I don't want you to waste your time, but I don't support your cause. I'm not a fan of rebuilding the shtetl in America. So Frierdiker Rebbe says, I didn't come here for money. So he was very caught off guard. He says, so what did you come here for? said, well, I heard you're a world-class tailor. And you see my kapata here, the button is a little loose. Are you able to fix it? So the man starts to chuckle and he says, Rebbe, I don't think you traveled 2,000 miles from Poland so that I could sew your button. Tell me what you really came here for. So the Frierdiker Rebbe smiled. He said, you're right. But I don't think your soul traveled even more than 2,000 miles to come to this world to sew.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
I'm getting the chills thinking about it, but the man was so taken that he of course, he took out his checkbook and wanted to know what that ever wanted, and he became a lifelong supporter and friend. So remember that. Our neshamas didn't come here. The Rebbe says, stop what you're doing. And the sikha that I just quoted, don't look at the clock. Stop thinking about yourself. You think that's why your neshama came here? Infinite amount of miles, spiritual miles? For anything that you think? We're chassidim of the Rebbe. We have a very strong mission statement. We have to carry that baton, like Chaya says, over the finish line. And if we won't do it for Klal Yisrael, for the Rebbe, I mean, what's a motivating factor for us?
Right. You know, do it for selfish reasons. Doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Just do it. Just do it.
Chanie, I just want to give
had a lot. Sorry.
No, I just want to give a plug for what you were saying about the Sikha, because I just watched it an hour before I got on. I just watched it on Gem, on their app. And to be honest, like maybe I have to confess, you know, this is already going on for years when families, maybe it's just been portrayed that way, but like every family sits down with a Shabbos around the table and they're watching Living Torah. And I always felt bad that wasn't my family, or that wasn't me at least. But now that Gem has put out their app and they have 70, and they really like cater to the ADD generation now, where they really condensed so much and it really made it interactive and very short snippets. I just want to give a plug. I get no commission from Gem at all, but I downloaded the app on my phone and it's beautiful. We're able to display it whenever. It doesn't have to be the Matzah Shabbos official sitting around after Havdalah situation. At any time, just put it on a big screen in your house or put it on a wall, and the kids can watch these really beautiful videos that they put together, and it's very touching. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Chanie, because I just watched that an hour ago from Jen.
I hope you don't mind that I almost transcribed it and gave it over, because I found a lot of times when people watch a video of the Rebbe, we're enamored, of course, for the beauty and the connection we feel to the Rebbe, but not always do we listen to the words. You know what I mean? Yeah, so please take the time to go on and watch this in the Rebbe's language, because it's much more powerful than anything I could ever convey.
You know, we're talking about birthdays, and minhag hamakom, the custom, not only in America, but a birthday means gifts. You know, it could mean cupcakes with sprinkles. It could mean a lot of things. But the derech klal in general, a birthday means gifts. And I have told my husband many times, birthdays and anniversaries that end in 5 or 0, the gift should be commensurate with the number, right? So 120, what gift? What gift could each one of us bring to the Rebbe? It behooves us to think about it. It doesn't have to be wrapped, doesn't have to have a bow, but we if you've been doing 30 letters, 30 days, you know, there was many letters about the Rebbe wanting us to write. The Rebbe wants to hear good news. The Rebbe wants to give brachas. So the Rebbe would welcome with open arms birthday gifts. And the Rebbe has told us, learning Torah, increasing mitzvahs, but each one of us could think of something significant that the Rebbe would say, oh, that's fitting, you know, she's going to bring this. Oh, you brought that. You know, we're not talking pie in the sky. We're talking real, practical, down to earth, connected to heaven gifts. So you could rub it on or you heard this.
So you heard this, and Chaya, we were just discussing that there's this thing going around now, and I'm sure everybody in the next 24 hours is going to see it. You heard this? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I just got a message from Rabbi Wolf in Chicago, where he's been actively reaching out to Rabbanim from worldwide. And then there's a list, like a whole list of all the Rabbanim, and of course, not just the Rabbanim, but the general Anash, reaching out that everyone signs their name, just basically saying, Rebbe, we're there, we're your husband, we're your soldier, and enough is enough. And I'm assuming that just the signatures itself is something so powerful. I know for myself that if my kid nudges long enough, I'm like, just take my phone, fine, even if it's the latest one and it's new and I put 100 locks on it, I'm like, just take it, right? So I'm assuming that the same would work for the Rebbe and for Hashem as well, when we turn to him and we're like, that's it, enough. It's been X amount of years, way too long. Nissan is coming up, and Nissan 100. Like, it's just so. It gets. I think the word is like ekeldik. Like it gets ekeldik already when Golos just goes on too long and it's just schlepping itself out. I think mission accomplished. We got the message. We got the memo. Like you said, Goyal Goy Cherev is totally understandable now, and no more hunger, no more pain, and no more suffering. We get it. And what's happening in Eretz Yisrael, what's happening in Ukraine, like it's all tied it together. It's just a perfect time. If Hashem was looking for the right time, I think he got it. It's 120 years. It's perfect. It's all good. In Crown Heights, they all got together tonight. I saw pictures where it's like you have the whole Crown Heights together, unified. I mean, what more beautiful nachas could the Rebbe have from that? Right. So, so this is the website. It was unitedfortherebbe.com. And over there, you're able to write your name. And then I am assuming also achlata, that a person wants to take upon himself. But even it's just your name being there, just saying Dayenu or Tzaynenu L'Raisis Malkenu, that we just want to see our Rebbe again. So it's unitedfortherebbe.com.
And they will read this. They will read the Pan on Yud Aleph Nissan at 11 o'clock, I believe. I think that's what it said. So
I love the way they worded it, like renewed in Yud on Yud Shvat, Yud Tavshin Yud Aleph. The Chassidim each sent in a letter of hiskashas to the Rebbe, and they said so. It's a renewed pan hiskashas that we're writing into the Rebbe, and it gives you chances to spread hachlatach. That's what reminded me, Chaya, you were giving suggestions. They had all those things there. I thought it was a really beautiful way to give the Rebbe a present. Say, I'm going to write a pan. I'm going to learn this. I'm going to learn that. It gives you like a checklist. You can choose something or your own.
Again, it's historic.
Yes.
This is historic, and we are part of history.
This just popped into my head that Moshe Rabbeinu was 120 years, and then he couldn't cross over into Eretz Yisrael. But now it's 120 years, and we can cross over into Eretz Yisrael. We're the generation. This is a repeat. We are the reincarnation. That's what the Rebbe said. So the Rebbe's words. Right. So the reincarnation is like now it continues. If the 120 years are over, this is the continuation of the story. So I wanted to share a beautiful story I heard this Shabbos. It doesn't connect 100%, but it just tugged at this concept of our connection as Chassidim to the Rebbe. Rebbe is an acronym for Reish B'nai Yisrael, the head of the Jewish people. Like Chaya was saying before, we're one people. And this was describing the unity in Crown Heights tonight at the event. When you wake up in the morning, you don't need to touch base with each part of your body to see if you're okay. The head feels the body from the inside out. And when it's a problem, when you feel a part of your body is the problem. My hip, my knee, my neck. You don't want to feel anything. It all has to be in unison. So I just heard the story, and I'd love to share it with you. It was in 1946 was the beginning of the story. There was a young Jewish man. He himself says. The story is told, I think the Cherniker Rebbe said it at a Gimel Tammuz event in Australia. And there's a booklet of all the stories that he's shared about Lubavitch, about the Rebbe. So he says it was this Jewish guy, and the guy himself says, I was in my stage where I wasn't doing everything I was supposed to be doing. And I lived in New Zealand, and I went to visit, I don't know if he said friends or family in New York, and I stayed in their apartment. And where did they live? in 1946, Crown Heights was not just a Chabad community, probably very few Chabadniks. I stayed on President in New York in an apartment building. I walk into the building and I get into the elevator and in steps another young man into the elevator. And he says to me, oh, from Yid, where are you from? He says, I'm from New Zealand. And the person says to me, and are there Jews in New Zealand? He says, I wouldn't really know. And he says, and is there a mikveh for women in New Zealand? And the man says, I don't know. So the man says to him, maybe that's why you're in New Zealand, to make sure that there's a mikveh for the women. And then the elevator doors open and the man walks out and he fears him well. He turns to his host and he says, who's this guy that's giving me in 2.5 seconds a mission in life?
Right.
That's the son-in-law of the Frierdiker Rebbe. I mean, the Frierdiker Rebbe was Rebbe then. The Ramash, they called the Rebbe. Okay. Fast forward 40 years, 1986. He's already moved. I think he moved to Eretz Yisrael. He became a chassid, I think a gerer chassid. I'm not sure which type of chassid, but a bekeshe and a spadik and the full 9 yards. And he says, and again, I had to be in New York, and I decided I'm going to go for a bracha to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He says, I did not look anything like the young guy that was in that elevator. I come up to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe looks at me and greets me, and he says, so, no, is there a mikveh for women in New Zealand? He said he could not believe it. He tells the Rebbe that he moved, whatever, I don't know the details of what their conversation went, but he comes back to Eretz Yisrael, he's in shock, and he goes to see the Gerer Rebbe, and he tells him, I just can't believe what happened. He tells him the whole story. The Gerer Rebbe says, I'm not surprised at all. He says, a neshama is like a fingerprint. No two people have the same. And someone like the Lubavitcher Rebbe sees the neshama. He's not recognizing you're wearing a shtreimel, not wearing a shtreimel, you're young, you're old. He sees the neshama. Of course he remembers. I'm not surprised at all. I'm more surprised with the fact that he still cares if there's a mikveh for women in New Zealand.
Right. Beautiful.
So do I have a second to share another story, Chaya?
Yeah, go ahead.
About the same point. So I heard this story also about a young bacher, a frum boy, but he started learning Chabad Chassidus and he became a Lubavitcher. And he reached the age of Shidduchim. People started reading Shidduchim to him. And he met a girl that he wanted to marry. And they write into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe gives him a bracha. Problem is, his mother, who was a frum Chassidish lady from a different kreis, doesn't agree with the Shidduch. And he says, but I got a bracha from the Rebbe. She says, I don't care. It's not a Shidduch for us. He doesn't know what to do. He writes a letter to the Rebbe. And after a while, he gets an answer, and the Rebbe gives him another bracha for the Shidduch. The mother is fuming. So people told her, why don't you write to the Rebbe, or you come to the Rebbe? She does. She comes to the Rebbe, and she tells the Rebbe, she comes on Yichudis, and the Rebbe tells her, how do I give a bracha to Achas and Chala? Sometimes I don't even know who they are. He says, I don't always know the boy and the girl. I don't always know the families. He says, where do I come to give a bracha to Achas and Chala? They should get married. So I'll tell you what I do. I look in Shemayim, and I look, do these neshamas belong together? If I see the neshamas belong together, I give a bracha. And that's what I did. But then your son wrote me that you don't agree. And that's not a small thing for a mother not to agree. So I thought, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I didn't see right. So I looked again. And I saw, no, this chas and kala neshamas belong together. So I told your son that this is his bashert.
Wow.
When the mother heard this, she never heard such lashonos in her life. She was a frum lady, so she appreciated everything he said. She came out, she said, would I stand in the way of such a shidduch?
Wow.
So why am I sharing these two stories? Because the Rebbe has more confidence in us than we have in ourselves.
I want to share a story. Chanie, you inspired.
Go ahead.
It used to be that Chas and Kala would have Yechidus prior to the wedding. And if they were so blessed that the parents, the grandparents, everybody was able to go in together. And more often than not, the Seder was that the Rebbe would address from the grandparents down often the grandparents would leave and the parents would stay, and then the parents would leave, and then the chassan kala was there, the kala would leave, and the chassan remained. Anyway, I heard this story from Chanie Itkin Gazinski, that when her older sister, Mara Tachtel, Mrs. Tachtel, was engaged, the entire family went in for Yichidis. The Rebbe spoke to everyone, and Chanie was the youngest. So finally, the Rebbe is addressing Chanie. She said she was 3 or 4 years old. And the Rebbe said, do you know Shema? So she said, yes. Something like, I'm a Yiddish Meidel. Of course I know Shema. So the Rebbe said, would you say it now? She said, no, I'm not going to sleep now. Now imagine what the parents are like this, thinking. So the Rebbe smiled and said, opened the drawer and took out a coin and said, I'd like to give you this coin if you'll say Shema. She says, I don't need money, my tati works. So the Rebbe said, are you going to say Shema tonight before you go to sleep? She said, yes. So the Rebbe said, I'm going to give you this coin now because later tonight you're going to say Shema before you go to sleep. And as Chanie approached the Rebbe's holy desk on the Rebbe's holy hand to accept this coin, the Rebbe said to her something like, but the next time I ask you to do something, sort of don't argue with me. Don't give me a hard time. Wow. Could you imagine? This was to a 3-4-year-old. So we have coins, like we have a treasure house that the Rebbe has given and is offering to all of us, and it's ours for the taking. Just have to step forward and be the beneficiaries of the shefa, the incredible unlimited flow of the brachas that the Rebbe is giving us.
Wow. Chaya, you remind me of something else that I want to share in times of Pesach as well. So my son was telling me how when he was in Teres Emes learning in yeshiva, so I think Fitcha Offen was he heard the story from him that when he was a bacher in the 1960s or 70s, it was still, the Rebbe was still doing a seder that people could see. It was open to chassidim, and the bachrim were allowed to come and stand. So they would do their own seder in like 15 minutes flat, so they can go. It was up until Tafshin Lamed, when the Frierdiker Rebbe Zevitzin passed away. Then they didn't do the seders anymore there, and the Rebbe did them at home. But till then, it was upstairs in the Frierdiker Rebbe's apartment. The chassidim joined, and the bachrim were able to watch. So we have a little bit inkling what the Rebbe did at the seder. And Mashpia said to them, it's one of the few times during the year that you were able to see the Rebbe begiloi. The Rebbe said the whole Haggadah out loud, and I came across something actually in my notes that the Ari HaKadosh actually said that according to Kabbalah, the Haggadah should be recited loudly and with great joy and with proper focus and intention. And if Chas v'Shalom Mashiach is not here, we should remember to say the Haggadah with joy, because this year we have the confidence that this is it. We are out of here. And that it's got like when the women came out of Kiryas Yamsuf, they were ready to sing and dance. But it reminded me of this story that I heard, because you just touched on it, that the Rebbe said to Chanie, next time I ask you something, you do like, do we really know who the Rebbe is? He's not just asking us something. So this is an unbelievable story. You still have time still?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So comes.
Say that again.
Till Mashiach comes.
So the Alter Rebbe, of course, we know the Alter Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek's relationship. So the Tzemach Tzedek got married, and he had a lot of money as wedding gifts. So after the wedding, the Alter Rebbe suggested he opened up his drawer. He had a drawer where he would keep money that people gave him, and he would use it to support the poor, to help marry off poor kalas, tzedakah. So he said to the Tzemach Tzedek, I think this is where you should put your wedding money. And the Tzemach Tzedek said, no, I don't want to put my wedding money in. I have other ideas. And of course, he gave his tzedakah. That goes without saying. But he went and he invested it with a businessman. And a few months passed, and needless to say, it didn't turn out too well. He lost his money. He was embarrassed to tell the Alter Rebbe what happened, but the Alter Rebbe surmised, and he asked him. So one day, the Tzemach Tzedek had no choice, and he had to tell him, I lost all the money. The Alter Rebbe says, let me tell you a story. I was a chassid of the Maggid. We were chassidim of the Maggid, and we traveled to a certain city, a certain little village, and we stayed in this kretschma, this inn, and it was a Jewish innkeeper. And we're talking to him, and we said to him, where do you daven? And he says, there's no shul here. There's no shul in walking distance. And we're the kids, apparently, he said, I have to be here because of Parnassa. I can't be in the village. They don't need it in there. I have to live here in the outskirts where I'm far from a shul. And the Chassidim, the Alter Rebbe said to him, a Yid has to live where there's a shul and a cheder. In the meantime, the Chassidim, the Alter Rebbe and his peers went off to daven. And when they came home, they see that the Jew is packing up all his belongings. So they said to him, where are you going? He said, I'm moving to the village. They said, what do you mean? He said, you told me that a Jew has to live in a community. So I'm not gonna. Anyway, he turns to the Tzemach Tzedek and he says, I was only a chassid at that point. This wasn't even a chassid of the Rebbe, of the Maggid. But he heard that a chassid of the Maggid said that you have to be. He packed up everything, didn't worry about Parnassa, and went.
Wow.
And then he turned to Tzemach Tzedek. He says, but you do know who I am.
Oh, ouch.
You do know who I am.
Wow.
I think we forget. We forget who our Rebbe is.
Well, that story you told that the Rebbe looked in Shemayim to see if the shidduch was correct. Like, what's there to say after that? There's no veil between here and there for the Rebbe. There's no distance, no separation. It's one and the same. So how fortunate we are to.
So, I was thinking today is the Rebbe's birthday. Tonight is the Rebbe's birthday. It's the day that Abish just sent us, the Rebbe's neshama, to lead us and to be our everything, to be our Rebbe, to be our Tata. It is no doubt why it's such a personal celebration for each of us. It's our Rebbe's 120th birthday. It's the celebration, like the Rebbe himself said, when the neshama came to this world to do the mission that the Eibishter designated for that neshama to do. And the Rebbe asked us to be his hands and feet and to finish the job.
Right? Can you imagine saying, "No, thanks. I'm a little busy right now. I'm peeling potatoes. I'm making a cookie. No, thanks."
Chaya, you do remember the Rebbe used to Farbengen, and the one Farbengen, the Rebbe says to the men, because the Rebbe used to Farbengen Yud Aleph Nissan, and then again Yud Gimel Nissan, the yard site of the Tzemach Tzedek, and it was 3 days before Pesach and a day before Pesach. And so one day, I don't remember if it was a Yud Aleph or Yud Gimel Farbengen, and the Rebbe says to the men, you're all so distracted because you're worried about your wives. Guess what? Your wives are up there concentrating.
Ah.
And I could talk for my mother for sure. My mother, Mrs. Tivya Jacobson, I will never forget 3 days before Pesach and 2 days before Pesach. Where was she? She was in 770 listening to the Rebbe. And her house got still done beautifully for Pesach. And we had beautiful sedarim with the best food ever. But she told me, I'm going to be home cleaning and thinking that the Rebbe is standing there talking, and I missed it because I couldn't stay up another 2 hours to do what I was going to do now. She said I wasn't going to miss it for Farbengen.
Wow.
Flying you out of my mother. Hi, Ma.
Amen. Amen. We will get there. We will get, we'll get to the finish line. We'll get to the finish line. And time stretches, and we should only be able to hear those words from the Rebbe. We should only have the Rebbe, Farbengen. And you know what? The Rebbe didn't give compliments, the Rebbe always raised the bar and said, and what's next? What's more? But I think when we pull this off, Rebbe's going to be very happy. We're going to pull this off. The Rebbe's going to. Can you imagine? We have the privilege to make the Rebbe smile. You know what? You know how awesome that is. Like, wow! And we're going to pull it off. And the Rebbe is going to stand in all his glory, and be grateful. It's up to us. We are.
You know, Chaya, you're mentioning that like we're going to be at the finish line. Sometimes I think to myself, you see on campus like all these Pew studies that come out, and you know, statistics and what's the involvement of Jewish life on campus today, etc. And it's pretty bleak physically. Statistically, 75% of American Jews are marrying out. Yeah, clearly it starts on campus, you know, that's where they're finding, you know, making relationships, etc. And sometimes you can really just get dragged down by thinking to yourself, like, is there the light at the end of the tunnel when the statistic is just too high? Every single kid that I know, and even the kids that I learned together with, you know, sadly are dating non-Jews. And it you know, every single time it stabs you like a knife. And I think to myself, I'm like, I'm just getting a little glimpse of what the Rebbe saw on a larger scale, and realizing like, hey, this is the generation that's going to witness the coming of Mashiach. And every neshama, one at a time, from wherever they are, neshama, you know, mitzvah at a time, like the Rambam says, one mitzvah is going to tip the scale. So you're not looking at this global like change in the world. And you know, people always ask, like, really, like, you really think Mashiach's coming? The world looks so dark out there. And I always switch it to them. I say, Mashiach's not coming when the world is light. Mashiach will bring the light. If we're waiting for the light to come, we're going to wait for a while. If we're waiting for every single Jew to wake up and to, you know, smell the coffee, you know, we're going to be here for a while. But ultimately, the Rebbe does write that when Mashiach comes, he's going to turn to us as Hasidim, you know, all of us, wherever we are, whether we live in Crown Heights, Chicago, Montreal, on Shluchos, it doesn't matter, as his Hasidim, and he's going to say, why didn't you tell your friends and your family that Mashiach is coming? And so best case scenario that we'll have to answer, either we'll say, oh my gosh, you're right, I should have been, like you're saying, jump on the bandwagon, or you're going to say, I tried, I told them, you know, but they didn't, you know, they didn't internalize it. And the Rebbe continues on to say that words that come from the heart enter the heart. And if you really said it with sincerity, they would have felt it. So, you know, I think that this vision that the Rebbe had, where he says from 2 years old already, he's dreaming about Mashiach, the Rebbe tried to inject in us, like, Mashiach is coming. I see it. I remember in Color War one year in camp, we made this song where the Rebbe is like the pilot, and the pilot tells us that we're landing, and you look outside and it still looks dark and it doesn't look like you see any landing taking place, and they're telling you, put on your seatbelt, we're getting there, we're almost there, and you're like, I don't see anything. You look outside, it's still dark, and within 15-20 minutes, you know, the wheels hit the ground and we landed. And that's really the case. Like, the Rebbe had these glasses. I know, Chaya, you have I'm looking at you because I feel like you're missing your glasses on top of you. You have it there. There you go. And the Rebbe tells us, just open your eyes. The world is ready. They want to hear it, especially after COVID. The world is really ready. They really want to hear it, and they really want to appreciate it. And it's up to us, his Hasidim. And I think that it has to start with us, that as long as we can inspire ourselves about Mashiach, then we can inspire hopefully our friends and our family, and the ripple effect can take itself further wherever we are, in whatever context we have, you know, whether it's our block and whether it's our, you know, extended family, or if you're on Shluchos in your Chabad house, or wherever it is. So, you know, you're cleaning, put something in your ears and start listening. There's so much out there today. You know, there shouldn't be a minute where you're just like folding laundry. You need a few minutes to detox, no problem. But you're folding laundry, put something in your ears and listen to something simultaneously. You know, obviously you can't do that when you're, you know, talking to your kids, but anything beyond that doesn't take more than the brain space. Simultaneously inspire yourself, because like you said, we're leaving Galus, and it's happening now. So we can't be like, I wasn't ready.
Right.
How can we not be ready after all these years? Like, really?
Like, now you're here now? Like, what?
Yeah, like if okay. You know, There's this one kid in camp. I remember I walked into camp and teen camp, and I walked into the bunkhouse, and she flew straight to the bathroom. She, obviously it was like nighttime, and I guess her pajamas attire wasn't up to par. She flew, and I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You don't have to fly for me. Like, it's okay, But I said, but imagine if Mashiach just walked into the door and you're flying and you're like running. We had so much time to prepare. Like, there's no more excuses to fly and to hide under beds anymore. Just be ready. And I remember there were some girls who actually put like a skirt near their bed or put a little bit nicer clothing near their bed. And they're like, when Mashiach comes, I want to be ready. So it's in our mindset, and it's in our attitude. And ultimately we have the power, because it's b'schus nashim tzidkanias. We hear it 100 times over, but it has to internalize once and for all.
Yeah,
it's happening.
One thought, there's a concept of imposter syndrome, and people would say, if you would only know really what I'm thinking, stop it, because that imposter part is the Yetzer Hara speaking. We are true blue neshama, mekusher to the Rebbe. That's the real us, and the imposter part is the voice that says, nah, not me, or if you would only know stop it. We are all holy people. We are noshim tzidkanios, not despite but because of the gullus right now, it's us at the finish line. So nobody should suffer from that and think, nah, it's not me. Everybody's gonna be, however it's gonna work, in the front row. I'm not sure what that will look like, but we're all going to be.
I don't mind if I'm not in the front row, because I somehow do feel like I'm going to be hiding behind some of our people, but as long as I'm there.
You know what?
As long as it happens. I want to share one final point, that, the Sikha from the Rebbe, when the Rebbe Rashab, on the Rebbe Rashab's 120th yahrzeit, so when the Rebbe spoke about Kluf Chaf Aleph, and he said, Me'ayin Yavo Ezri, read it as Me'ayin, from Ayin Yavo Ezri will come our salvation. It's like from the unknown, from the Eibush to the part that we can't even fathom. So interesting, when Rivki Slonim was interviewed for the Kinnos about the Rebbetzin, that's the word she used. She says, how can I describe the Rebbetzin? Ayin. That's the only thing I can say. And then I told her afterwards, I said, if you read where the Rebbe describes the Rebbetzin, and he says she's our role model, and how with her passing, we entered into this final stage of that the house is already beautiful, and we just have to beautify it. We have to the house is finished. The Dita B'Tachlenim is finished. We just have to decorate it. The feminine stage era has. And I always wondered, so few of us knew the Rebbetzin personally. And the Rebbe says she's our role model. Because Ayin, there is something, the unknown, that is, as we don't even understand the strength of Malchus, of the feminine strength, ushering in Mashiach. The Rebbe said, Nashim Tzidkanias will usher in Mashiach. So we're doing the right things, but we have to understand that there's an element of Ayin that we don't understand, and that's okay. That's actually where you're able to fly. It's like what I said before, that the body, when it doesn't feel itself, is when it's healthy. When we are part, the Rebbe, the Reish B'nai Yisrael, and the body is just doing what it's supposed to, that's when it's the healthiest, when it doesn't feel that it's its own. Imagine if your hands and feet thought that they had their own agenda. We don't have our own agenda. We have the Rebbe's agenda. We have the Eibish's agenda. And I just want to wish l'chaim to our dear, beloved Rebbe, and to all the Chassidim worldwide. We should dance together in celebration of Mashiach Tzidkenu in Yerushalayim Erev Kodesh with our Korban Pesach. Thank you, Yehudis, for doing this.
Amen.
I want to conclude with a story that just really resonated, and maybe if each one wants to give a closing, because we have time till, don't worry. We're good. I heard this really touching story one year where I think it was the year of the Yom Kippur War, or was the 6-Day War. One year at Tishrei, and both of you might have been there in 770 at the time, where the Rebbe was trying to blow Tkiyas at the time, and the shofar wasn't coming out. Now, usually when the Nasi's blowing the shofar, it's a triumph for all of Klal Yisrael, and clearly when the shofar is not being blown, there's something baruchnius that's going on as well. And everyone stood there watching the way the Rebbe kept trying to blow the shofar, and it's not coming out. So people started thinking to themselves, I'm sure globally something's going on, something, meant to happen this upcoming year. And, the Rebbe is trying to break the gezerah, like all the, Baal Shem Tov stories. And there was one particular guy that's sitting there in the crowd. And he needed a bracha for children. And he's thinking to himself, Tkiyas is a very powerful time where the Nasi is blowing the shofar and he davens for all of Klal Yisrael. And so he's thinking to himself, in order for the brachas to come and to flow, I need to make a keli for it. So he thinks to himself, what can I make? We're talking about making hachlatas, right? So, hachlatas are there to bring down and to draw down the brachas for ourselves. It's a gift for ourselves. It's a catch-22. It's a gift for the Rebbe, but it's a gift for ourselves. And so he's thinking to himself, I want to make a hachlata so I could draw down these brachas. What could I do? I guess, this is even before the internet days, but he was getting a subscription of a magazine to his house. That wasn't the most appropriate for it to come into the home. And he said to himself, I'm going to cancel this subscription. It's not meant to be in the chassid's home. I'm canceling it, and hopefully this will, allow the brachas to flow. And he wished for the brachas of a child. As he's thinking this in his mind, all of a sudden the shofar starts to blow loud and clear, and the Rebbe starts his tkiyas. Now, nobody obviously understood what's going on. And nobody, and everyone thought something big's going to happen that coming year. And perhaps that is true, because that year was one of the wars that broke out. It was either Yom Kippur War or the 6-Day War. So clearly the Rebbe saw things that were happening that year that he definitely had to break through. But simultaneously that year, his wife was blessed and conceived a child. And the following year, he comes with his baby to the Rebbe. And as he's holding the baby on dollars, the Rebbe looks at him, and the Rebbe looks at his wife and the baby, and the Rebbe says, "Is this the Tkiyas baby?"
Oh, wow.
Is this
Wow,
the Tkiyas baby?
Wow.
So, when we talk about the Nasi of the generation and Chaya and Chanie, like you're saying, the Rebbe's looking up and seeing the two neshamas. Halavai, we would get our answers today for Shidduchim that way. But at the same time, the Rebbe is still here giving us the brachas, and he's just asking us to connect. And he made it very clear how to connect, whether it's taking the time to read a letter of the Rebbe in the language that you understand, or whether it's a few minutes. Today, everything's so accessible, taking an app and looking for a minute and 20 seconds of the Rebbe and a message of the day from the Rebbe. However it is, whether it's Miftzayim or whatever we choose to, take upon ourselves. But every single one of these connections are connecting ourselves obviously to the Nasi, but they're there and they're drawing down our brachas, and they're there bringing us all of the gashmias and ruchnias that we need for our life. And when we think about a Nasi's birthday, a birthday is our birthday. It's the Rosh B'nai Yisrael, means it's all of our birthdays. And of course we celebrate on a birthday. So first of all, was the Chassidische Farbengen, ken uftan, ken malach machal neshuftan. So what better opportune time to give each other brachas, that if there's anyone that needs anything their heart desires, Banei Chaya, Mezayne, Reviche, Begashmis, and Baruchnias, and Chassidish Nachas, and Yiddish Nachas. And I don't even want to start with the brachas, because it's from Aleph to Taf and everything in between. And only Hashem knows what we truly need. So Hashem should give it to all of us. And we all, have our little pekala that we can use the brachas for. So Yud Alef Nisan is a good time to get all those brachas. It's our birthday. And simultaneously, it's giving brachas back, because it's our birthday. So we want to wish everyone all the brachas. And it's a time where we reflect. And Chanie, like you mentioned, where the Rebbe says, I was reading a letter once where the Rebbe writes that when we wake up in the morning, before even Maida Ani, we should look at a picture of the Rebbe, and the looking and gazing at the Rebbe automatically the Rebbe gazes back at you and gives you the strength to fight your Yetzer Hara for that day. Because the Rebbe writes, how can we fight this galus? The Yetzer Hara is so strong. Chaya, you mentioned, he's fighting so hard these last moments of galus. He is, because when Mashiach comes, he's going out of business. So he's trying really hard. So how do we have the strength, right? We know that Moshe Rabbeinu said that he looked through all the generations and he gave a shudder at the generation of the coming of Mashiach, because he said, if I would be in that generation, I don't know if I would be able to pass those tests and those nisyanos. And it's true. We're not living in Russia times, and we're not living in times where our Bubbas and our Zaydis had to flee. whole nother level of Mesiras Nefesh, and our grandparents ate bread and butter, whole nother level of Mesiras Nefesh. But we're living in the Mesiras Nefesh of affluence, and we're living the Mesiras Nefesh of assimilation, and we're living the Mesiras Nefesh of our technology in our hands, on the palm of our hands, and yet at the same time we have the strength to overcome it. And the Rebbe says, by gazing at a picture of the Rebbe will give you the strength to overcome your Yetzer Hara for that day. So we want to wish each other that we should have the strength these last moments of Galus, so that when Mashiach comes, we don't have to flee and run under any beds or, into bathrooms having to change our clothes. Summer's coming. We want to look dignified. We want to be ready. We want to be prepared. The Rebbe says that ultimately, B'schus Nashim Tzidkanias, and we know that Chala Nida Hadlakas Neres, that it's through bringing into Shabbos into the home. And I know there was like a whole campaign trying to bring Shabbos on time and not like dashing out of the shower and lighting your Shabbos candles. Come like a queen, come ready, light your Shabbos candles. If you have the ability to inspire one other woman to go to the mikvah, go for it. Once Mashiach comes, the brownie points in Gullus are magnified now. So now's our chance to do it. When Mashiach comes, we're gonna. What does the Rebbe write in Hayam Yaim? There's a little element where we'll yearn for the days of Gullus. There'll be a little slight, we don't want to yearn for any days of Gullus, but the only thing that we'll yearn for is, why didn't I do more in Gullus? And so now's our time. Now's our time. If you have one lady that you could inspire that one woman to go to the mikvah. If we need to inspire ourselves a little bit with any halachas, great. Strengthen ourselves and Taras HaMishpacha a little bit, in Shalom Bayis a little bit more. Don't get stressed out that you found another little Cheerios under the bed when you swept it 5 times over already. Chanie, you mentioned beautifully when you Farbengen that, Erev Pesach, we're getting rid of our ego, we're getting rid of the chametz, we're coming relaxed, we're coming prepared to the Seder, we're coming like a queen, and that's how we're coming towards Mashiach also. So, I think that we're ready. We don't need any more time to prepare ourselves. We had enough time. Longer than that is just, schlepping itself out, as they say. And we're ready. We're ready. And so we turn to the Rebbe and we say, Rebbe, we want to see you.
Beautiful. Amen. Amen. L'chaim, l'chaim.
L'chaim.
L'chaim. Chaya, I want to thank you for joining, and Chanie for you joining, and ultimately everyone worldwide for joining. And for those who couldn't join live, I know that it's on YouTube live as well. So there are many, many that are joining now, and we'll hear the recording as well. And this should just uplift us and inspire us and strengthen our iskashrus for ourselves and our family, so that we can see the Rebbe, the Guf, in Yerushalayim, this Yud Aleph Nissan, so we could say Lashana Habab Yerushalayim and literally be in Yerushalayim.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Yehudas,
so
for organizing
Thank
this.
you, thank
for
you.
doing
Beautiful.
this.
A kosher and a freilichen to everybody.
Amen. Kosher freilichen Pesach. And you could join the United for the Rebbe.com to sign your name of proclaiming with Seinenu L'Raisis Malkeinu. Check it out. United for the Rebbe.com, where hundreds and hundreds of people are signing their names together with Rabbanim worldwide, and just proclaiming Eksav Eskashrus to the Rebbe, what they did Yud Shvat, the first year of accepting leadership. Now it's coming to fold all these years later. So l'chaim to everyone, and have a kosher Feilichem Pesach. L'chaim.